Hey, everybody, who killed Goliath? David killed Goliath, right? At least that's what it says in 1 Samuel 17. But the books of Samuel are a patchwork of different sources. And sometimes these sources tell the same stories multiple times and in different, sometimes contradictory ways. And we can see this just in chapter 17, because we have David being introduced to Saul, David going out and fighting Goliath, and then David having to be introduced to Saul all over again. Now, people will say, well, the first time he didn't know who his father was, and the second time he's just asking who his father was. That's plausible. But the earliest versions of this story from the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls don't contain the second introduction. That introduction was added later. So these are two separate introductions. And there's a third, because Saul already knows who David is. Saul already knows who David's father is. David is already a part of Saul's entourage, at least according to the end of 1 Samuel 16, where Saul is introduced to David. Saul loves David. Saul makes David his armor bearer, and Saul talks directly with Jesse, David's father. So we have conflicting stories of how David came to know Saul. 3 different stories within about 70 verses. So the compilers of the books of Samuel are obviously comfortable with a little bit of narrative tension like that. So why is that important? Because we've got a different version of the Goliath story as well in 2 Samuel 21:19, where it says a man named Elhanan killed Goliath, the very same Goliath from chapter 17. Both of them are described in precisely the same words. Goliath, whose spear was like a weaver's beam. So this is the same Goliath. And Elhanan was probably the man who originally killed Goliath. And then we had later compilers of the traditions associated with David who probably appropriated this heroic story for the David tradition. But this earlier one got included anyway in Samuel. And initially, these stories probably circulated independently, so it wasn't a big deal. But then they got stuck together. And then they made it the problem of the compilers of Chronicles, because they had to deal with this, and they had to figure out what to do. So in 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5, we have a third story. And it says that Elhanan killed Lachmi, the brother of Goliath. And this is actually a way to render the consonants that is very, very close to what we have in 2 Samuel 21:19. So it's likely just a tiny little manipulation of the consonants. Now, this has led some people to say, well, 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5 is probably the earlier story that is preserved in this later text. And 2 Samuel 21:19 is the corrupted version. There are a few reasons this is unlikely. To begin, the texts of Chronicles are looking back at a consolidation of a bunch of different literature and freely make changes in order to serve their ideological bent. So it's more likely that they tried to harmonize these two conflicting texts. And this is further supported by the fact that Lachmi is a ludicrous name, because it would mean my bread. And that's just not a naming convention that we know from anywhere remotely close to this time or this place. Additionally, it would be a Semitic name, and this is a Philistine. So it is not likely that 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5 is preserving the earlier version of this. There are textual issues in both 2 Samuel 21:18 and 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5. But the 2 Samuel story is likely the earliest, and it likely attributes the killing of Goliath to a man named Elhanan. Later authors likely took that tradition and then rewrote it with David in the position of the hero instead of Elhanan. Later authors putting together the books of Chronicles had to harmonize the two, and so decided to go with a change to the text that was very slight, did the least amount of violence to the text, and attributed the killing of Goliath's brother, Lachmi, to Elhanan. So that presupposition of harmony, the imposition of a harmonizing reading, isn't supported by the data and is not a data-based approach. It is dogma.